I'm that excited today because I'm bringing to you someone who will cross over from being an international player, a leader, a captain of your teams, a CEO of your club, very well known in business. A lot of people, Denis Fitzgerald, I might say before I start, Denis Fitzgerald, and so thank you. But I'm just trying to rattle off an introduction here. I don't know where to start. Even, and your phone won't stop going off, so we better shut that up. But Denis, a lot of my listeners, they're leaders themselves in some way. There are a lot of teachers, a lot of coaches, and a lot of athletes as well. You cross over everything, so I'm really excited where this chat may go. If you don't mind me grabbing the attention of the listeners by just name-dropping some leaders to start with, I want to know about Jack Gibson. One of my great friends and mentors in Wayne Bennett often talks about Jack as a person he really admired and idolised and was mentored by. Wayne's now the greatest, that the current listeners know Wayne's the greatest. You employed Jack. You were the CEO that employed Jack Gibson in the 80s. That the Parramatta fans listening, it's still the days they all love reliving. I want to know about the leader, the coach. Why was he so good? He's so well respected across the game. He's on the wall of many different clubs where he's coached and had success. In your eyes, Denis, and you value leadership, you're a great one yourself, what made Jack so good?
Well, I think he was unique. He was pretty much new as far as rugby league was concerned in the way that he spoke to people for a start, spoke to players, coaches, fans. No one can sort of get away with Jack with these one-word answers that he would have. And Jack actually learnt a lot through the NFL football with the Vince Lombardi. He used to quote, they had some very good quotes with Vince Lombardi, who was a gun NRL coach, which would have put him back in the 70s and maybe even 60s Lombardi. Yes, but Jack was good. Everyone listened to Jack. He was a dominant person. He had the reputation of being rough and tough and looking after some people around the King's Cross area and things. Yeah. So no one sort of answered Jack back or had arguments with him. What Jack said is what they did. And then a big part of what Jack did was his offsider Ron Massey, who was used to work with Jack before he came to Parramatta in Jack's other enterprises. Yeah. And Massey was very good, very clever, more the talkative guy, more so than Jack. And that was a big help. But Jack was also the first one, rather than just with his contract, have it with Jack Gibson, it was with his company. And then Jack in turn employed Ron Massey, Alf Richards, who was basically the first aid guy. It would have been a better title than that. And also Mick Suter, who was a school teacher. It was in days of part-time rugby league players back then in 81 when he came. So, yes. So Jack, there was no good talking to Jack's offsiders. Jack made all the decisions, especially when Jack was paying them.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I've heard so many good things about Ron Massey.
Yes.
And now to hear that Jack had such a good offsider in Ron Massey and the other guys you mentioned there. And people, like players, they seem to love him. Like, was he that... Like, away from being that hard man that he obviously was, what were his people skills like with the player underneath him?
Well, they were very good, and he used to look after them if players maybe had some family problems or whatever, or financial problems, or got into a little bit of trouble with whoever. Jack would straighten them out and maybe talk to the people that were causing grief to various players. Jack was exactly. He had their back, and in those days in the 80s, we're talking 40 odd years ago now, with the his first year with us in '81, it was a different way of life to a large degree, and certainly as far as football or rugby league is concerned, when you're just part-time, and then, players would be with their other full-time job, and maybe they got caught up at work and they were a little bit late. Well, Jack didn't like that, but he could understand it, and because you basically had two masters there with the head coach at your club as well as the boss of wherever you were working.
Okay, and so you never actually got to play with Jack. You were the CEO that employed him. What was his philosophy on football? Do you remember? Do you remember his coaching philosophy? Or we're talking about his personal qualities, but what made that team so great?
Well,
they were the last team before the recent Panthers to do it 3.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. One, Jack recognised, and I think that was another reason why he came to Parramatta. He saw the potential in so many of the players coming through that maybe were starting to make their name prior to '81, like Peter Sterling and Brett Kenny, Steve Ella, Eric Grothe. They're all about the same age, so he could see that, but he also thought that he'd need a couple of older guys there as well. And of course, Ray Price was there. Ray came in 1976 to Parramatta, and he was a top line Wallaby before he came, but he came from Dundas Valley, so he really knew the Parramatta scene. So that was a big part of it, that he saw the potential at Parramatta. But Jack brought Kevin Stumpy Stevens over, sort of shaking the head and thinking, gee, he's about halfback size Stumpy, but he was a great defender. And a good person to have around, Stumpy Stevens.
And the leader of that team, captain of that team, Stephen Edge.
Yes.
Could you share with me some of his qualities, if there's leaders out there listening? What did you remember of him? Because that guy not only won premierships at your club, the Eels, he had also won them at the Dragons previously.
Yeah.
And he'd also won lower grade premierships. Wherever he went as a captain, they went to the grand final and won.
Yes.
And you ended up employing him years later to head up your marketing team, and he became a mentor to guys like Aaron Warburton, who's now the CEO over at the Bulldogs. So Edgy, it seems like I need to do an episode with you, Edgy, if you're listening. Edgy must have some great qualities and characteristics of a leader. Do you remember?
Yeah, very much so. He was smarter than the average rugby league player. He was an accountant. I think he worked for the taxation department, so I don't think he made many friends because of that. But he was very clever, and he was a good thinker, more than just crash and bash and run into brick walls. Edgy was very good, primarily as the hooker in those days, was win the scrums when they went down, when scrums were real scrums, and then as the dummy half. So he wasn't particularly big or strong or fast, but he just had he knew it all around there, because he realised maybe what his strengths were and what his weaknesses were. So and a very good talker with the teammates, and it was a matter of follow me, boys. It wasn't about you go in there and get smashed or something. He had a good rapport with the rest of the team, but he was the person for the time there where Jack appointed him the captain, where maybe a number of people thought that that Ray Price might have been the captain, but I'm very glad that he chose Stephen Edge.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned a couple of things there. He's good at communicating. He led by example as well. I remember I've seen him post his playing career. I've seen him in the workspace. He's brilliant at developing relationships and building relationships, and you just mentioned there he had a good rapport with the team. It's so important in leadership, right?
Yes.
There's no one. There's got to be something about what he did, that formula for every team that would win.
Yes.
And then I've seen him in the workspace where he's just very good at getting people to do stuff for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what Jack was like too. With that. One of the, just with Jack again, about I remember a journalist saying to him, well, Jack, the team's going well, but you seem to be a very defensive coach. And Jack said, well, what else do you do when you haven't got the ball? and then moved on.
Moved on. and
Yes.
and defence wins games.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I'm really big on, I've said it on this show with the multiple guests, the most connected team becomes the best defensive team, and the best defensive team wins.
Yes.
And I've just tried to hear that in our chat already around Jack and Edgy. And Edgy's so good because I've seen, like I said, I've seen him connect people. He's so good at creating a connected team.
Yep.
And then you've just told me that Jack valued defence so much.
Yes.
And they win.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, no, I really appreciate going back there and some memories. And you've name-dropped a few players, which brings me to a question that came through from David Solomona, one of your Eels players in the 2000s. He messaged on the Instagram saying, could you ask Denis who's the best junior player you've ever seen come through? Now, you just mentioned some names there, but we've got to pick the best. Like you've mentioned Sterlo, you've mentioned Brett Kenny, you've mentioned Eric Grothe.
Yeah.
We've got to pick the best, and it doesn't have to be through the 80s. I mean, we've had some good times there in the 2000s. There was a time there, we talk about best juniors, the Parramatta Eels were the club champions for 9 years in a row. And I know that because I was there.
Yes.
And I saw so much that went on, and you headed up the club then. So we could pick a best junior in that era, or we could pick it from the 80s.
Yeah.
We've got to find one player.
Well, overall,
Yep.
I would say Jarryd Hayne, which people might raise their eyebrows at that, but he was just a sensational player. He was nearly once in a lifetime.
Yes.
Before him, he wasn't a junior, but I used to rate Ken Thornett as the best player. Then I rated Peter Sterling. I mean, he came from Wagga Wagga, where his father was in the Air Force there. His father moved around a bit in the Air Force. But Sterling didn't play juniors, but he had his year in year 12 was the 1 year at Fairfield Pats. Yes. But Jarryd Hayne, he just changed things in the blink of an eye, That 2009, where we got to the grand final and were beaten by Melbourne, who then had the grand final trophy taken away from them because they were cheating on the salary cap.
Well, Denis.
And I thought, well, why can't we just give it to us, to Parramatta there? We forever... No winner in 2009, and we were runners-up. Yeah, but I did pay a lot of attention to the juniors. I was a junior myself. Went to school at Parramatta Marist all my life. Well, before then, St Pat's Parramatta, so very much a Parramatta boy.
Yeah.
But when I left school in 1967, among other things, I got on the committee of the Parramatta Marist Junior Rugby League. And then I became the delegate from Parramatta Marist to the Parramatta District Junior Rugby League. Yeah. And we used to have our meetings down at the Progress Hall or something in Station Street, Wentworthville, which was a bit of an eye-opener for me with, a lot of the clubs naturally are from Western Sydney around Parramatta, but a number of their delegates used to, that particular hall was next door to the Wentworthville Hotel, so there used to be a few that would come to the Junior League meeting after a few schooners. And so that was an education process for me, which later was good when I became a delegate for Parramatta to the New South Wales Rugby League, which is a whole other story.
Well, not many people would know that. You always had a passion for that admin space, because you then played first grade at Parramatta, you then captained Parramatta. So you were a leader on the field, so I wouldn't mind asking what you feel your strengths were as a leader, as a player. But I never knew about you already had that passion for the admin style. And then you become CEO, Denis, and you're still to this day the longest serving CEO in rugby league. So could I just tell you that when anyone ever asks me about you, because in leadership, as you know, you don't always keep people happy. There's some people love you, some people don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And you seem quite okay with that.
Yes.
But a lot of people ask me about you, and I say the NRL is that ruthless. No matter what role you have, whether you're a player, a trainer, a coach, an assistant coach, an admin. It doesn't matter what role you have. If you're no good at your job, you are gone within 2 years. Some may last a little longer if they've got a bit of help, but really, the NRL is ruthless. It spits you out. I remember Brian Smith once telling me NRL stands for not real long. So I tell anyone, if you last 30 years, you must be pretty good. 30 years, longest serving CEO in history of rugby league. What are your strengths as a leader? I know we talked about Jack and Edgy, but what were yours as a player, and what do you think transferred into? And then, is there any lessons you think you could share along the way? What are your strengths, Dennis?
Well, I think you've got to be a good listener, as they say. I give you 2 ears but only one mouth, so do a lot of listening. I had rugby league in my veins. My great uncles played for Australia, the Farnsworth brothers, way back in 1910, Billy and Viv, and they played for Newtown. And actually, I used to go with my dad down to Henson Park, and not watch them, but he was a Newtown supporter because his uncles, Billy and Viv Farnsworth, played there. So I knew a lot about rugby league from about age 8 or so. So that was a good start. But there's one thing to know about then. To follow it as a fan, completely different to play and be better. I never thought I would be good enough to play for Australia or rep football, but I thought, oh well, being at Parramatta, once I started playing third grade, as it was in 1969, that had a good year there and won a trophy or so. So I thought, there's a good chance here if we can do a bit more work and build up a bit. Had a wiry frame and about 6'2" or about 190 centimetres these days. But it was a matter, even then, I think, as a leader, I was vice captain of the school at Parramatta Marist. So a bit of leadership there, a bit in the family. My sister, one of my sisters, was captain of a Lady of Mercy College at Parramatta.
It's next door.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think you just learn as if you're I guess, smart enough. And I wasn't a genius by any means, but just you needed to realise just what you have to do to get ahead, to get to the next step, either as a player or as an administrator. And that's where it was good that I was dealing with junior league people, as I said, way back in 68 when I was 19. And it was a bit of, who's this young whippersnapper or whatever the term was at the time, telling us what to do. And so I sort of kept in touch with the Parramatta Marist Junior League as a player for another few years, but then it got a bit too much to be doing when you're playing, and certainly in first grade, and have your own full-time job as well. But there were things that happened even in basically in 73. I saw that the running of the football club, the Parramatta District Rugby League Club, as it was called, wasn't all it could be. I used to call it, it was like a chook raffle the way it's being run. And it was all by people who were good-spirited people who generally had a role in junior league or had played. Yeah. And I thought, we've got to do better than this. We've got to move on and become more professional about it and make decisions. So it was way back in 1973, a mere 50 years ago, that I started getting people together. The interesting thing was just to know from the start, well, what are the rules and regulations here? In other words, the constitution of the Parramatta Club. Right. So I knew that. And you needed to vote at annual meetings. You needed to be a member of the club for 3 years. You couldn't just say, I'm going to be a member of the club and vote for new people or old people or whatever. So I had as many mates as I could from Parramatta Marist, of course, who were all Para supporters, to join. I paid for a lot of them. In those days, the membership per person each year was all of 50 cents, so I could well afford it. So I ended up having about 30 mates from nearly all from the school, as well as then I've got a big family, so I got them to join.
Joined them up.
With the view that in 3 years' time, we might have 30 or 40 people eligible to vote who were very likely to vote for who I thought that should be on the committee. So
well done.
Yeah, and so
all this was happening while you were playing.
While I was playing, and I was threatened with my contract being torn up because if you're going to have change, well, as it was a committee, 16-person committee, 16-man committee. That wasn't any talk of females then. That you had to pick someone that you'd leave off. And because at the annual meetings, there were usually only about 100 people that came to vote.
Yes.
And so here's me as a 23-year-old with maybe somewhere between 30 and 50 votes who were going to stick there. So it had got big changes through in 70.
So some people who were threatened by that also had their signature on your contract.
That's right. So
you got threatened with your contract, but you kept playing.
Yes.
You captained the team.
Yeah, well, that's it. 2 years later, I captained the team in 75.
Yeah. You captained the team to a grand final, and then when did you...
Oh, well, I didn't captain to the grand final. And
was there a grand final in 76 or not?
76 was, well, that's another story. 75, we had Norm Provan as the coach, and we had... We were equal fifth in days of 5-team semi-finals. So, but there were 3 teams equal fifth. So we had all these playoff games. So the 3 teams there were North Sydney, Balmain, and Parramatta.
Right.
And I became captain in the middle of 75 with Norm Provan, who I admired greatly.
Yes.
Following year, Terry Fernley came in, who I didn't admire all that much. And but in 75, so we had to go. We won the MK Cup was being played there, and we got beaten that year by the Roosters, wonderful club, the Roosters.
Yes.
In 75, because they won the comp in 74 and 75, and Gibson was with them. Jack Gibson was coaching them.
Yes.
So it was an unbelievable thing that we had to do. We had to the MK Cup just meant there was another game in the middle of that. Yeah. But we had to win the second last game. I've forgotten who that was against. But then we had to beat North in the last round so that we had a chance of getting to the semis. And I think one of the other, either Balmain or West had to lose. But anyway, what happened? It was a 3-way playoff. Para beat... West on the Tuesday, and there had been a flip of the coin about who of the 3 teams wouldn't play in the first game. So it meant that the team that didn't play was better off than the 2 that did play. Anyway.
And that was a flip of a coin.
A flip of the coin to decide that. And so Balmain won the flip of the coin. So Parramatta beat West on the Tuesday at the cricket ground.
Yeah.
Played on the Thursday and beat Balmain at the cricket ground. And so that meant that we were the 5th team, and so we had to play on the Sunday. So it was...
3 games in 1 week.
Well, it ended up being 7 games in about 16 days. It was remarkable stuff.
Put that to the people that talk about how heavy the training loads and game loads are now. And it was a crazy physical game you were playing. And you were playing in the front row.
I was in the front row, and Bob O'Reilly's in the other front row.
We've just dropped some great names. Norm Provan.
Yeah.
We need to talk about him.
Yeah.
We've dropped Bob O'Reilly.
Yeah.
People want to know about Bob. So you and him were in the front row, were you, together?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
You played for Australia together with Bob?
Didn't play for Australia. He basically stepped down from the rep football. I first played for Australia in 75 and then again in 77. Played for New South Wales back in 71 and 76 and 77.
Okay. Tell me about Bob.
A lot of stories about Bob. One of the best players... probably most publicity and people think about Beatson as being the best. And I'd agree with that as a front rower. And really the first one that I knew could really offload the ball very well, as well as being relatively quick, for what he was. It was seen old programs lately where he was 16 stone 7, which know, I've forgotten how many kilos that is. It's a lot, though.
Yeah. So just on Beatson, did you
This is Beatson.
recruit Beatson? Did you recruit Beatson
Oh,
to
well,
Parramatta?
With the help of the Bear, and I thought it would be really good to get Beatson. So Beatson, that he still had some to offer in 1980. He played a fair bit of second grade in 1980.
Did he?
But didn't play there in 81. So there were, interestingly, a few players that were playing, and me as the CEO, or club secretary as it was called, I was younger than 3 or 4 of the players. Like Graham Olling was older than me that played there, and Bear he's about 10 months older than me. And mention of Wayne Bennett being 74, and everyone's quoting that there, and I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm 74. I'm about a month and a half older than Wayne. Right. With that. But anyway, getting back to the Bear, so I think he would have only been maybe 21 when he was selected as front row for Australia in the 1970 World Cup over in England. He was also in the 72 World Cup, and I think that was a tour then. And then there was 73 Kangaroo Tour, which was a long tours then. So he basically the Bear and Arthur Beatson were the front rowers.
Right.
So.
And why was... I mean, because whenever I've heard you talk about the Bear, you talk about him with a lot of passion, like he must be a good mate.
Yeah.
What made him such a good teammate?
Well, he was basically the biggest and the strongest and the most qualified person as a front rower when I was coming up, even though he's only less than a year older than me. He got up in the first grade a couple of years before me, as then played for Australia, as I said, at a very early age. So he was a good bloke to have on your side. But he was very good, somewhat like Beatson, with offloading the ball, because you're very wide but strong, but just had that knack of offloading the ball. He was very good, and often I'd be the recipient of a good pass into the open or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but very much a character off the field, and loved the schooner and still does. Yeah. But he was a hard worker. A number of the guys just before me, and when I played, had trucks. Even Ron Lynch, who passed away only last Sunday week. The funeral was on Friday, a few days ago. That Ron, when he first came down here from Forbes, he got a job with a truck with Shell, who are just there at Camellia near Parramatta, as well as near James Hardy at Camellia, who have just...
They're coming back.
They're coming back. I couldn't believe it. I thought, is this right? I thought I must have had an old newspaper or something, that they're coming back, which is terrific. They were
fantastic.
They were the major sponsor from 81 to 95. Talking about 2 or 3 years that I mentioned earlier on at the start of the interview. But they were terrific, and with James Hardy, it's just moving along to them. Their general manager was a very keen Parramatta supporter. He lived at Winston Hills. Yeah. Then we had Jack Boyle, a good friend of mine, who was the safety officer for James Hardy. And Jack Boyle and Jack Argent, they're the ones that have been pumped up. Oh, not pumped up, that's the wrong word. They've been recognised as being the two guys that found the block of land for where Parramatta Leagues Club is now at 15 O'Connell Street. Jack Argent was a builder in himself, and Jack Argent was, as well as being, he was known as a colonel because he was in World War II.
Is that little house still there?
Sorry?
Is that little house?
Oh, the little house wasn't bought. That was part of Parramatta Park. So, so that's not there any longer. But that's where the groundsman was. Old George, who I don't know whether George was... No, George wouldn't have been there.
I always remember
George Coates, he was a lovely bloke. So the groundsman, he did a good job for what he knew about. But I don't think he had any other helpers. I think he had this great big wheel where the hose came out, and he used to do it. But it was like a rocket course.
Well, it's great to see James Hardy going back as sponsor, and And those great years in the mid-2000s, especially the 09 year with Hayne that you mentioned,
Yes.
is Pertec who sponsor this show.
Yes.
So we've got Pertec, we've got James Hardy all in the one conversation.
Yeah. No, Pertec were a terrific company,
Fantastic,
and
yeah.
they're still a terrific company
Yeah.
in motor racing and things. And
Yeah.
I think they're headquartered in America now, aren't they, and going really well.
Well, yeah, they've still got the headquarters here in Western Sydney. It's
Yeah.
huge, and they're global. Yeah, there's headquarters
global,
all around
yeah,
the world.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, that we're just mentioning some good times there of that 09 year, and we're reminiscing the 80s that so many listeners go to. But
Yeah.
I want to go now to the 2000s. I guess we skip a little bit there. I mean, there's probably Super League War stuff we could go to.
Yeah.
Where I remember it was pretty famous for you. You went and signed the big four, was it? The big four you signed? From
Sorry,
the
yeah,
Bulldogs? And
the
then
Fab Four.
Fab Four.
Yes.
The Fab Four. Let me see if I can remember these.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you got Dean Pay.
Yes.
Can't forget him.
Yeah,
Jarryd McCracken.
yeah,
Jim Dimmick.
yeah. And Jason Smith.
Four. Jason Smith. The Fab Four from
Yeah.
the Bulldogs. Geez, he was a great player, Jason Smith.
Yeah.
So, and then you also had guys like Gary Freeman. You had you had a real good
We
crew.
did
Those
Gary Freeman, Adam Ritson,
That's right.
Aaron Raper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember.
So
Yeah.
so really strong. And then
Yeah.
and then we got Brian Smith as
And you
the
brought
coach.
Brian Smith in because there you go.
He'd been over in England.
So as you know, Brian's a great mentor to me
Yes.
in the coaching space, and mentor to many, like including Trent Robinson now at the Roosters.
Yeah.
Like Brian was a very good mentor, and we did an episode on here with Brian that so many people have messaged in about.
Yeah.
But which was probably some interesting chat about you and Brian. So you employed him there
Yep.
to get 9 club premierships in a row. So for the listeners that don't understand, that's from the juniors all the way through. I'm not sure where they're sitting now, but back then, those were the days where it was the benchmark. Everything Parramatta did, other clubs wanted to copy. It was the benchmark. What were your memories about that? And then also, there must have been a tough decision. I'd be interested to go there on the leadership topic. The tough decision to let a coach go.
Yes.
Because, like we said, it's part of leadership. You're not always keeping people happy, but you've had to hire and fire people.
Yes.
So it would be crazy if we don't go there, because listeners out there, some of them do have to hire and fire, and it's not easy.
No.
What is it like? Oh, actually, let's go your memories of hiring Brian in those great years, and then we have to go through the hiring and firing as a topic.
Yeah. Well, with Brian, he was coaching over in England at the time with good success.
Yeah.
And so we had the coaches in order. Of course, after Jack, we just go to John Money. He was there as a coach in 1986.
Yeah.
So John Money was a coach for 6 years, from 84 to 89.
Yep.
That's right. And then we had a couple of other former players, Mick Cronin as the coach. I think Mick was there for 3 or 4 years as coach. Then Ronnie Hilditch. Mick had been coaching Gerringong, which is a fair distance from coaching Gerringong to coaching Parramatta. But, he was he's still a very smart bloke and played that much football, with Parramatta. He ended up, even though he had a few seasons at Gerringong before he came to Parramatta, he had the 10 years at Parramatta from 77 to 86.
Yeah.
So when we spent a lot of money, the players' money, contract money, trebled overnight when Super League came along, and I and the Parramatta Club, nearly everyone in the Parramatta Club, were very keen to stay with the ARL. I used to keep on saying, well, we're not going to fall over or give over to Rupert Murdoch and News Limited, who want to steal our game from us. The game belongs to the fans. That's who it belongs to. Who've been coming along to terrible grounds like Cumberland Oval, Leichhardt, which hasn't changed much to this day. Yeah. But they were all pretty basic, as you know, all the grounds back then. and generally a capacity somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000, but facilities were just disgraceful, especially at Cumberland Oval. So that was bad. So anyway, getting back to Brian, so it was a matter of spending a lot of money. Thankfully, the Leagues Club was travelling very well then. Or getting back to the 80s, we started going well, and we moved to Parramatta Stadium. It was built for 1986, and we had a great year that year financially. One of the few mistakes I made as a CEO in 1986, I said, since we won the comp, we moved to Parra Stadium rather than we had 4 years at Belmore, of course, playing and training then at Granville Park. But we made, in 1986, the football club made over $500,000, which is a lot of money, nearly 40 years ago. And then the Leagues Club was going well, but besides winning the comp, we won what was then the National Panasonic Cup, which took over from Amco as the sponsor. Ronnie Hilditch, I think, was captain of that team. And so we had that, but we averaged just over 20,000 people per game, which had been unheard of. You couldn't fit 20,000. Well, you could. I know we did put 20,000 in Cumberland Oval at one stage, but people were sitting on top of each other, standing on top of each other. What I did say at the time at the annual meeting was, look, we've made a profit, and it was a figure I remember, the football club without a Leagues Club grant of $555,333. So I thought, how good's that? And I said, never again will the football club have to count on the Leagues Club for a grant. Well, 1987 came along. We missed the semis. We got knocked out in the first round of the National Panasonic Cup. The crowds dropped from 20,000 to 15,000. Thankfully, the Leagues Club was travelling pretty well, but it ended up that basically from having a profit of over $500,000, the next year in 87, we needed a grant of over $500,000 from the Leagues Club. But anyway, that was, hopefully, I didn't make too many errors at that. But
obviously, the Leagues Club would give a grant in the late 90s when you're paying massive wages. Massive wages.
Like trebled overnight.
So some of that Fab Four, the amount of money you paid for the Fab Four, and then bringing Brian in, I'm sure he wasn't cheap either. Talk us through those times. I mean, because I have great memories of actually working at the club with Brian in those days, and there was such a family feel to that place. It was. I'm not sure. All my memories was a lot of support from the board. So much support. Brian had so much support. You just let him run the coaching, run the footies. We were definitely benchmark in a lot of areas, especially in that junior system that was set up there as well. You mentioned before Jack and his influences from Lombardi, and it was always like winning starts in the front office. Like your front office was obviously you and your board, but your front office, even Arnie Kay, who I've talked about a lot, when you walked in that place, she just had this family feel of staff, and then that filtered through to players. My memories of that place were very good memories. What were yours with Brian? I then want to ask you, letting him go, because you obviously had to let a few coaches go along the way to get to Brian. What's it like firing someone?
Oh, well, that can be tough. I think you've got to be sure of your facts and doing it, and to be fair to them, to the coach, and that is like any employee. If you're letting them go, it's a kind way of saying they're sacked, but I didn't sack one coach, which I say in the 30 years. Right. Even with Brian, I'll just go on that while it's in my mind that he had ended up over those 10 years or 9.5 years, had 3 contracts, and in that his last year of the 3rd contract, which was, when was that, 2006? And I had the philosophy with dealing with the players that if we didn't, we needed to give players maybe at least half a season if we weren't going to recontract them, to let them know so they could get to another club. Similarly, various coaches that would apply, or lower grade coaches or whoever it might have been, to make that decision halfway during a season. And that's what happened with Brian. Halfway through the season, I and the board said, well, Brian's had a really good go here, and it's a bit of not winning a grand final, and so maybe a bit of what the situation is now with Brad Arthur having just being let go, sacked, depending on which newspaper you read. But I said to him, we won't be giving you a contract for next year. This will be finish at 10 years. Said, we're contracted to the end of this year, and then you can go. But he then decided himself he wasn't happy with that, and he said he would pull the pin pretty much that week.
Right.
One of the things that were going on at the time was Jarryd Hayne. That he kept Jarryd Hayne in second grade. For whatever reason, he didn't put him in first grade. Soon as Brian went and Jason Taylor became the interim coach, Jason put him in the first grade, and he was winning all sorts of awards, and the Player of the Year.
I remember it well. I just know that there's people out there that sometimes struggle with a tough conversation, and I never felt you did struggle with that, because you had so long in that industry where you had to make tough calls.
Yeah.
And I do remember that time. Brian had influenced so many players and staff for the rest of their careers that look back on what a great job he did.
Yeah.
And I remember that week too, Jason Taylor's first thing was put Jarryd Hayne in the week, and he ended up, I think we played Penrith that first week, and we might have lost that one, and then the week after we went on a winning streak, and Jarryd scored a try in every game and got Rookie of the Year type year. I think he ended up from playing SG ball to playing first grade to playing in the Australian squad that year. It was pretty remarkable. But that's I did want to go there because you've made some big calls, hiring and firing.
Yeah.
How do you handle it? You just sit across the table like this and just tell them straight up? Is there what's the tactics of letting someone go?
You generally don't get any joy out of it, even though...
There's no small talk to start with? There's no how's the family or anything? Just straight up. This is what's happening.
If you know that a person's coming in to see you, and there's one only reason that we will let you go, don't necessarily say you're sacked, it's just... It was more this is your 10th year, it's halfway through the season. The board have decided.
The board have decided, yeah.
The board and myself have decided that there's no further contract for you. And we also, to your advantage, you've got the time now to look for another position before the start of the following season. So that was the other reasoning about it, rather than wait to the end of round 26 or 22, whatever it was at the time, and all the first grade jobs are gone. So it was that.
That's actually pretty fair the way. Because I've seen it other ways. I've seen staff make it to an end of the year and get told after the season, and then all the jobs are taken. That's a pretty fair, reasonable way to do it.
Well, that's right. And at that time, he was by far the longest-serving coach. Yeah. And as I say, I didn't sack him. I was just told him that he wouldn't be there in, what did we say, 2007.
So, hiring people, who's been your best hire you've ever hired, and why?
It's hard to single one person out. One person I'd like to give mention to is Greg Mitchell, who would know Will. And I've known Greg for a long time. I think Greg had at least 10 years working for John Quayle at the New South Wales Rugby League, but he'd also been at Penrith, because he lived at Penrith. Was he with someone else?
Great man.
I think was he with the education department or something?
I think so.
But anyway, Greg's still with us, thankfully, and a terrific bloke. And he was really good, especially as more and more of my time was taken up with the Leagues Club, and the fact that Greg was across the road, across the other side of Grothe Street, which is now Eels Place, a building that's been knocked down, which used to be the old Northcott building.
I have great memories of Greg, big mentor actually. For me, Greg gave me my first... Your signature was on my first contract, but Greg did the deal.
Yeah.
Greg did the negotiating, Greg did the deal, and your signature was on it.
Yeah.
And he guided me through a lot of stuff. And now I know he's a great mentor to people still in that in the game. So when I just asked you to just say who was your best hire, he didn't actually say he was your best, but he came straight to your mind because he must have been good for you.
Oh, well, he was, He was a quiet achiever, so he didn't yell and scream at anyone. I like to think that I don't either. But sometimes you've got to be solid, let's say, with that, depending. And to talk to a few footballers who misbehave, so you had to be solid to them to get it through their thick skull. What they did incorrectly. But Greg was ideal for me, with me being seen to be making comments or interviews or whatever. He was working very solidly behind the scenes and had that quite very knowledgeable, that quite knowledge about him, had been around, and the fact that he'd been at the New South Wales Rugby League under John Quayle for, I think, about a decade. He was terrific to have, and to maybe say that you used to go to him to get some advice, and that was terrific to have a guy like that who was generally in the office all the time, where I might have been out and about at various functions.
Well, you were always the functions in the media, and they called you the Emperor.
Yeah.
That still sticks to this day.
It does.
People still call you the Emperor.
Yeah.
You were very... everyone come to you for a voice in the game. So there's some people... Obviously, they come with so much. You can't buy time. You can't buy 30 years as a CEO. So with that come, people want your opinion on things. You're on the board of, from my memory, you're on the board of 1,000 things, including New South Wales Rugby League, including back then I remembered the Parks Trust, like your government boards. There's a lot of reasons people come to you. But how did you go with the media? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you have to manage? Like, how?
Having been a player, and in the early days, you're dealing with the media then. So I wanted with like a number of the clubs have someone from just a business background that hadn't been with the clubs or hadn't dealt with the media. And media, they're good and bad, probably like most occupations. And part of the media, they've got editors getting to the reporters. That they want a back page. It used to be certainly in days of where there were 4 newspapers in Sydney that you might recall. There was a Telegraph and the Herald in the morning, and the Mirror and the Sun in the afternoon. And so, if the Herald or the Telly had a story in the morning, like coming overnight, you had to back it up and trace up the people who were saying various things there. But what really got me going more than most as far as the CEOs were concerned, when Cumberland Oval finished, or the grandstand was burnt down, I mean, that just went with it. It was always going to be knocked down or not used anymore for the stadium to come along. So that was 81 when Cumberland Oval finished, 86 when we started at Parramatta Stadium. But in those 4 years, we played at home ground was Belmore, and as I said before, we trained at Granville Park, where Jack Gibson bought the bus in Granville Park. That's another story. So what I used to do, especially since we're playing at home at Belmore, where we needed to give it more publicity for people to go to Belmore, rather than people who Para supporters certainly, and most of them lived around Parramatta or within 10 k's of Parramatta, and before things started to move out further, especially up the hills area or further down south to, I mentioned Mount Pritchard before, Cabramatta all those areas. So I used to try to do my best to make up a few things about mainly the opposition. So I used to upset Roy Masters a bit when he was coach of St George. Of course, with us being our home game, that's, we got a lot of our net income from the games at Belmore. And Belmore was a very good ground and had the railway line there, not the main western line for Parramatta to Penrith to Central, but it was on the Bankstown line there. Yeah. But it was a very short walk from Belmore Station to the ground, and they had quite that big grandstand and the big hill on the other side, which would have been the eastern side. When we're playing St George, I remember a couple of times I was saying, well, St George aren't going well, and we were going, because we won 2 comps when we were playing there at Belmore in 82 and 83. And I said, well, if the Dragons don't have a good win against us this year or this week, the board at St George, who are used to winning, might be getting rid of Roy Masters and things like that upset where and you, because Roy was and still is a journalist, so he could always have a go back at me. So I was ready, to cop it back. But it meant it went on and on.
You're like a boxing promoter of rugby league.
Yeah.
So you were selling the game then because you needed ticket sales.
Yeah.
And you would, as the leader of the club that needed to make the club money,
yes,
you were actually like a boxing promoter selling the fight.
Yeah.
So, which it turns out you ended up on the board of the Combat Commission too. We didn't mention that one.
The
combat.
Combat
Sports.
I was chairman
of the Combat Sports. You've had too many jobs to mention on this show.
New South Wales Combat Sports Authority. Yeah.
So you were the original promoter.
Yeah.
No, well, that's interesting because, you did become very well known and the Emperor stuck. The nickname stuck. We only bumped into Justin Holbrook the other day out of the Roosters, who came straight up and said, "Hey, the Emperor."
Yeah.
So the Emperor nickname stuck. That was from a radio show you used to do every Friday on 2KY. I remember.
That's right. Yeah. Richard Freeman, horse trainer. He's still training horses. Yeah. Richard with his son Will.
Yeah.
Because as an introduction to come on and do a 1 minute segment that went about 5 minutes generally.
Yeah.
Used to play a bit of music, like a bit of Roman, whatever, Roman, not bullfighting, but anyway, so all that sort of emperor type music, and that's where so Richard Freeman of all people. So I bump into him occasionally at the races. That was good.
Dennis, when we mentioned Greg Mitchell, you talked about a mentor of his, John Quayle, and when we mention other coaches, I mean, I always talk and hear about influences in my life. They just, we mentioned Brian, we mentioned the Waynes, we mentioned different people that, Trent Robinson, who you called up with the other day, who's big influence on myself, who under Brian. So we're always talking about that. And I encourage people to talk to anyone old. I encourage people to find that person who's got your back and wants to build you up. I've been privileged to have many good people do that to me. Who did it to you? Who are your influences in your life that we could give a mention to?
Probably sort of a bit of a backhanded one was with, as I mentioned, the very early days of the Parramatta Junior League when I was still playing and things. But and I started going to the fortnightly meetings of the New South Wales Rugby League as a delegate with Jack Argent. So it was then the old and the young. But Kevin Humphreys was chairman of the New South Wales Rugby League. Then in 1979, I became the club secretary in 78 and 79. So that used to be every fortnight. But I think my background of even being involved with Parramatta Marist Junior Rugby League, and then Parramatta Marist, and then doing as a player, trying to get all the enough people on side playing politics there, was good grounding for when I went to the New South Wales Rugby League, which was certainly another level where you had people who had been there at the New South Wales Rugby League for 10, 20, 30 years, and Kevin Humphreys and the cartel as everyone called it, had control, and they didn't like these person coming along. What helped me greatly was the fact that I was a CEO of Parramatta. You know, the fact that we won in 81, 82, 83, and we were winning all the junior club championship things. So if we hadn't been up at that level, I think they would have been knocking me out and, you know, would have got rid of me somehow or other just through that process. But it was a matter of, so there was 42 people on the New South Wales Rugby League committee.
Right.
But the cartel, I can nearly mention that, I might as well mention their names. It was Kevin Humphreys, Peter Moore, a bullfrog.
Yeah.
He was a good, I got on well with him, but he was very shifty, let's say, bullfrog. One of his sayings was, he said, "Remember, son, never, ever, ever tell a lie unless it's absolutely necessary."
Right.
So I didn't necessarily take his advice here. But Ken Arthurson was certainly another one there on the cartel. Charlie Gibson, who was at South Sydney primarily, but at Penrith as well, that when they had some dramas up there.
So is there anyone that said, so I look back at my own coaching, right, or even the great guys at Pertec that have supported me in other areas. You know, like whether it be Ivan Cleary of recent years to Robert or Smitty, whoever it may be, that basically you can feel when you're in their company, you're like, mate, you're going all the way. I'm taking you on a journey, and I look back very grateful for those people. You know, I think you might have even started at the start of the show when you were 8 years old, going to Newtown with your family. That it's just been your life, hasn't it? And then in and amongst there's a little politics. You said playing politics. There's a little area that you become passionate about, and you seem so comfortable doing it. You know, it's not for everyone, that.
Oh, no, certainly not. You know, no, after I left school, I went to Sydney Uni for a year, going to be civil engineering. I thought, it's just not my scene. Basically being a nobody there at university and catching the train and things, as opposed to going to school at Parramatta.
You just seem so comfortable. Even the bit about not keeping everyone happy, and we joked even off the camera about some people like you, some people don't, and even I've mentioned names and you just very cool. We talked about Ray Price before, and you talked about all these positive qualities. I know clickbait works like the old journalist. I could have baited you there to tell me negative stuff about Ray, because it's pretty well known you two don't get on, and you didn't even go there. I just respect that about you. You're just such a pro, and I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You know, I'm sure there's some lessons there for people following in your footsteps.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah, everyone can go forward. Go backwards.
Yeah. No, thanks very much, Dennis. Good man. Oh, the ring. The ring. Wait, stop the show. For anyone listening on the Audible, I've just shaken Dennis' hand. You got a premiership ring there. Yep. Rings weren't given out back then. Parramatta have given you this ring, I've noticed, which you are the last CEO to win 3 premierships in a row from Parramatta. The last CEO to win a premiership at Parramatta. Yes. Is that the same one the players were given? That's fantastic.
I'm very proud to receive that, given them I didn't play there, but I was CEO of obviously all those years, from the winning years, and very maybe 1 through to 86. Sure.
Good on you. Thanks again, Dennis.
Okay, thank you.